Om Jnana-Timirandasya Jnananjana-Shalakaya Chakshurumilitamyena Tasmai Shri-Gurave Namaha. Nama Om Vishnu-padaya Krishna-prestaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti-vedanta Swami Namine. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Prachari Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatari Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shrivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. My dear Lord, please guide us all as we learn how to see the world through the eyes of your words. Hare Krishna. So I am grateful to be here with all of you today. And since this is a topic on preaching, I'd like to start by asking you, so when we talk about, say, current affairs or current, and I want to use current affairs, and I'm not just going to restrict it to some event that comes up in the news and stays for some time. Current affairs can mean many different things, but I would like to start by asking you about your understanding or your experience, since many of you may be engaged in preaching at different levels, how the changes in the current world affect us when we are preaching. If you are trying to share Krishna Bhakti and you have probably been there for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, do you observe people, the kind of people who come? So basically, how does the world affect our events in the world or changes in the world? How does the world affect our outreach? Now, I don't want to necessarily give a philosophical answer, but just some experience of yours, how the kind of people who are coming, the thoughts of people, you have observed it changing. I hope my question is clear. So, yes. Okay, I'll elaborate the question. So, how do changes in the world affect our preaching? Say one simple example I'll give is that previously, when I was into 96, the internet was not there at all. So, we could count on people's ignorance for them to accept our version of things. But people don't know anything. So, okay, we seem to speak with authority, we quote Shastra and people accept it. But now, everything that we speak, people can immediately Google and cross-check. Now, that doesn't mean Google is necessarily giving the right answer. But the point is, we can no longer rely on people's ignorance. So, that has an effect. Certain statements which we might have quoted, like say the idea that Dale Carnegie, the person who wrote How to Influence People, he committed suicide. The wide, he himself had no friends and he committed suicide. I have heard it, I have quoted it. Have any of you heard this?
Yeah. We
Quoted also. But that's just not true. There's another person who wrote a caricature of his book called How to Lose Friends and Alienate People, and that person committed suicide. So the person who quoted it, as far as that, there's a website also which does like quote investigation. So this particular anecdote seems to come from Ravi Shankar. He quoted it for the first time that Dale Carnegie committed suicide. So now he might have heard it from someone, but in the public domain that has come from there. So in the past, really, it's something new, and you quote it to everyone else. So we could rely on people's ignorance to accept our authority, but we can no longer do that. Now, I gave a whole class on this topic recently in Mira Road, not in Mira Road, in Delhi, in the Dwarka temple over there. That one boy came to me and he said that he was preaching, based on our DYS course, and he said that my whole faith is shaken now. Not only in the preaching but in the philosophy also. He said we quoted that based on embryology, that in the third canto the embryology description is so precise that the child in the womb suffers and there are worms which bite the child. Now it says medical science is certain that there are never any worms in the womb. The worms are in the intestine, not in the womb. So you see Shastra wrong. Now in the past we would have straight away accepted this, but now people challenge it. So he said, I was giving this class and one boy, he was giving this class in America, and in the class he said this is just wrong. He said there is no evidence of worms in the womb. Now of course you cannot say there is no evidence. Generally there are no worms in the womb. But in extreme diseases, the infection becomes more, worms are in the intestine. From there sometimes they can go to the womb. So that is the answer to that. But my point is that this is one significant change, that we could make statements and many of our statements would go unchallenged. Now people have resources to challenge. That doesn't necessarily mean people have become wiser. It just means that we cannot expect the same level of submissiveness in accepting our version. So my answer to him was that the Bhagavatam, it is giving a specific incident that is being described. It is not necessarily a universal principle. Prabhupada says, for example, the child cries, the nurse gives him bitter medicine when he's just hungry. Now does that happen to every child? When the child is crying, the nurse will give bitter medicine? May or may not happen. Some children may never have any nurses only. Only mother is there. So what is described is a possibility. Is it a possibility? It's a possibility. But when we claim it's a universality, then we run into problems. So anyway, that's one example. It may be an extreme example. But my point is that as the times are changing, as the way people think, the way people have resources, those are changing. So I'm trying to build up on the topic. Now, why do we at all need to respond to current times and current issues in current times? So that's what I'm asking. Have you experienced any changes? Yes, yes.
The depravity and the degradation in the modern society are very recent times. Very recent times, like last 3-4 years.
Hare Krishna. So, probably the depravity and the degradation in the
Can you give a specific example of what do you mean by depravity and degradation?
The way the opposite gender dresses, which was limited to the silver screens, but now it is, everywhere evident. Like girls are dressing in little questionable ways, which was not the case a few years back, which is like agitating to the senses. So in one sense, one part of me says that there's no point living in this material world, because you have to control your senses, focus on Krishna, and then we are also supposed to preach. To preach means we have to connect to them, and when you connect to them, there is such negative energy. One devotee was he shared with me a video. That video was about what is the current youth thinking. So there's a video called Nothing Except Everything. So basically the idea of the video is that there is no meaning to anything. The more you think, the more you will get lost. Better just enjoy everything. So the confidence with which these people are believing in that philosophy and living a reckless life, it gives first of all yourself doubt, and then you have to really be strong to remain steady yourself.
Yeah, so you could say the way kind of people we encounter are much more challenging. That's definitely a truth. And just to give the other side of the story, when I started going abroad, and I saw even devotee women who sometimes dress in not exactly provocative ways, but just a little revealing clothes. So I was talking with Yamut Maharaj, I was talking with some other devotees in Western outreach. So basically for them, when they do that, it could be many reasons, but one of them is it's their desire for autonomy. It's not necessarily that they want to agitate others. Who are you to tell me how I should dress? That they want autonomy. And second is also, it is nature who has given men more power of the level of physique, and women have been given power at the level of beauty. So they say that if men are going to express their power, why should women not express their power? So they see it as autonomy and empowerment. So it's like so from their perspective, they don't see it as degradation. In fact, how they see it is that we are being empowered. And is it a perverse mentality? Well, we cannot connect with that mentality as long as we think it is a perverse mentality. So, is there a desire to attract? See, this male and female psychology said that men desire women and women desire the desire of men. So, the more a woman sees a man is attracted to me, that gives her a sense of power. So now the Vedic tradition was both men and women have to curtail their powers. So men have to use their power for protection, not domination or exploitation. Similarly, women have to curtail their power. So it is true, this is a challenge. Recently there was a proposal in our temples and on the ICC that we should have a dress code for people who come to the temples. But then the problem is that how are we going to enforce the dress code? And then are we going to send people away? Especially young people are coming to the temples now. Do you want to not stop coming to the temples? Most likely, see, many Indians are religious and somehow that religious instinct is still there. But often they are religious and they are philosophically agnostic. That means they want to come to a temple, but which temple they go to doesn't matter. It's not only ISKCON temple that things are rising. Every temple, young people are coming. So if we impose a dress code, all that is going to happen is young people will go to other temples. So it's very difficult. But yeah, I agree with this particular point that so there is when people are behaving in a particular way, it's important that we understand why they are behaving that. Now that may be problematic from our perspective, and we are not giving up their perspective. See, understanding someone is not agreeing with someone. But sarvopadhi vinurmuktam, when we say give up all designations, actually we give up all designations, give up all labels. We have labels for everything. This is a deviant, this is degraded, this is like this is like that, this is like that. So we reduce people to labels. Now I have seen like in the yoga circle, many of the women who come, they are physically attractive, they are fit, they wear also revealing clothes. But in the Western audience, I've seen they are among the most seriously interested people. Now of course we cannot cultivate them. We can give some classes, we need somebody else to cultivate them. But the point is that their material appearance is not necessarily a spiritual disqualification, or not even a sign of spiritual lack of interest. So I was at an interfaith conference in Washington DC, and this is a common problem in the Christian church. One Catholic pastor was saying that, Catholic priest, they are Protestant pastors, Catholic priest was saying that they deal with this issue of how to have a dress code. Because in the church you don't want people coming in revealing dresses. So the way they resolve it is that they say we should have a dress code for everyone, not just women. So the idea is that they say that everybody, this is a sacred space, and to respect the sanctity of the space, everybody should, when they come here, should be in this particular area, that in the sandal, that they should be covered from the shoulders to the knees at least, and they apply it to males and females. And then women don't object so much. Once you make a dress code for a particular gender, then it becomes a gender issue. So now I had proposed this, and there everybody said that we pujaris wear uttari. The upper body is exposed over there. So it's not, we can't simply apply that. But so my point is that sometimes when we observe people doing a particular thing, now with regarding your point also of people just saying that there is no meaning to life, it is because they're really fed up with others telling them what is the meaning of life. No, this is what you're meant to do in your life. And it's not something which is as necessarily a sign of degradation. It is a sign of people wanting their own autonomy. Now within Bhakti, can autonomy be given? To a certain extent it can be given, definitely. But this is a good example. We'll try to address that in due course more. But just a quick response to this, that now quite often what we think of as degradation is not necessarily degradation from within their worldview. Any other points? Yes. Okay, good. Thank you.
The liberalization and free speech, which is being given a lot more importance, and people are executing it now. So by that, it's good that they are able to express themselves, but at the same time, and good that they are independently thinking over the topics. But by that, they cannot be bound to the philosophy or a teacher, and they carve out their own philosophy. And if something is told to them, it feels like that something is imposed upon me, and they try to go away from that. So this is, they become more of restless. This liberalization has become more of, give them more of restlessness, as they don't hold upon anything. That's what I feel.
Yes, that is true. See, one of the changes is that what you said is degradation. I find that word very judgmental, but you could say that there are many things in it, but it's an expression of autonomy. Now, the thing you said is that they don't like imposition. So there is a joke among Christian preachers, that I think this was also a real life incident. This pastor in the same, that interfaith meeting, it was very revealing, because Anuttama Prabhu has been doing this for 10-15 years, and it was a Hindu Vaishnava Christian interfaith meeting. So all these people who were there, they were all very vulnerable. They were expressing, the topic was preaching to a postmodern audience. So it was all of them were from the Christian perspective saying what are their challenges in trying to reach out to youth, and some of our devotees were also sharing their challenges. So he said that I had gone to a radio show. It was a long time ago. This radio show, and he said, I'm a Christian, but I don't go to any church. And then he said, the preacher asked very cautiously, respectfully, can I know why don't you go to any church? I haven't yet found a church that agrees with my philosophy. So, a lot of people today, they want to think for themselves. Now, whether they can think for themselves, that's a different issue. But if you tell them you can't think for themselves, then they will never think about you. After that, they will just reject you right from the beginning. So, there is, one of the differences, like the Eastern society is generally very hierarchical. The Western is much more egalitarian. It's much more, although there's a hierarchy, but it's much more horizontal rather than vertical. And our conventional way of preaching is very hierarchical. And that's why we are successful in areas where the culture is still hierarchical. In India we are successful, in Russia we are quite successful, in Ukraine we are hugely successful, in China also, although Hinduism itself is illegal, but in spite of that we are doing some level and getting some outreach. So where the mainstream society is hierarchical, our way of presenting bhakti works very well. But wherever the way becomes more egalitarian, more horizontal and less vertical, we are just not able to register. We are not able to have an impact. So when Radhanath Maharaj had written the Journey Home book. So he had given me an advance copy. I had already written some books before. He said, read, what do you think about this? Tell me. So I read it, Maharaj. I said, Maharaj, the stories were thrilling. What struck me the most was the tone. You are not right. Here, speaking like a guru speaking to disciples. It's like a friend sharing experience with other friends. So Maharaj said that this is the tone that you need for Western outreach. And as India has also become westernized, we will also need this tone for speaking in India. So the point is that it's not that there is no respect. It's not that the West is a culture of disrespect. But the thing is, respect, it cannot be assumed. Respect has to be earned. That means, oh, you have this PhD degree, or you are the leader of this institution, or you are so and so. That's why, especially if you are in a religious institution and you are a head of a religious institution. Like say in India, if we come to know somebody, the Mathadipati of a particular Matha, there will be some respect for that. But it's almost as if you have a position of authority, that makes you an object of suspicion, not trust. Especially if it's a religious organized religion, people have a lot of hesitation about that. In the entire journey home, Maharaj uses the word ISKCON only once. When? While introducing Prabhupada as the founder of ISKCON. Maharaj never mentions that I ever joined ISKCON. So Maharaj has positioned himself as a spiritual leader for Western outreach, not as a leader of ISKCON. It's a subtle but a very significant difference in positioning. So authority, respect is there. It is people will respect, but respect has to be earned. What you know, how much wisdom you have, how you walk your talk, through all that, respect has to be earned. And it is very difficult for those who live in a vertical culture. They assume a certain level of respect, and of course they also have to earn it. But there's a starting point where there's an assumption of respect. But that starting assumption of respect itself becomes a problem. So, we have had broadly 3 ages. We have the pre-modern age, the modern age, and the post-modern age. So in the pre-modern age, whether it is India or the West or the Middle East, their scripture was the authority. Everybody accepted scripture, whether it is the Quran or Bible or Old Testament or Vedas, scripture was accepted as authority. In the modern times, science was the authority. So the idea of a soul, is it scientific? The idea of God, is it scientific? But the West largely is in a post-modern times. I have done probably several hundred programs of Western outreach. Nobody has, not several hundred, it's few hundred, but nobody has ever asked me to do a session on scientific evidence for the existence of soul, scientific evidence for the existence of God. People don't care. It is, in the postmodern times, experience is the authority. Personal experience. Does this work? So the soul, maybe it exists, but the idea of a soul, how does it matter to me? How does it add value to my life? So experience is what works. So you can say India is almost like all these 3 India is in all different parts of India are in all these 3 stages. There are parts of India which are still pre-modern. Just you quote Ramayana, you quote Bhagavad Gita, and people accept with authority. This is what is told Shastra, we should do this. I'm not talking about devotees, general pious people also. Now there is much of India, I'd say a large part of rural India is in the pre-modern ages. The small cities in India, the towns and the small cities, where just now systematic education is going place. I was in Hyderabad, one devotee, he's doing tribal outreach. So he told me that he went to some remote villages in Orissa to distribute Bhagavad Gita. And they said in the school, Bhagavad Gita is the only textbook they have now. So they are teaching people English, history, geography, everything based on Bhagavad Gita. The school but no textbooks. And they said if you are not given us the Bhagavad Gita, we are going to use a Bible because we have a Bible over there. Somebody has gone and distributed a Bible over there. So there are parts of India which are very, very remote even now. So the thing is, there are part of India in pre-modern times even now. So there are parts of India in modern times where the scientific ethos is slowly going in. But much of, say, Mumbai, Delhi, Bangalore, Hyderabad, these metropolitan cities, much of them are in the postmodern ethos. So science really doesn't matter so much. It is important, but it is not the most important thing. People are interested in technology. Technology as a means of making life easier, people use that. But science as a tool for determining the truth, for evaluating what is real and what is not real. Not many people consider that as very important. There are, but not many. So it's like the pre-modern, modern and post-modern, all these three ethos are there. So what you're talking about is largely post-modern ethos, where people feel that this is based on my experience, this is what has worked for me. And if this is what has worked for me, if anybody else challenges that, then they just either oppose that or they reject that. So that's because what happens is that everybody needs some shelter. And somebody may be in the cold and they have a thin, torn, little tattered blanket. They have that blanket around them. That has given them some relief from the cold. Now if we go and then give up that blanket, I'll give you a thick comforter. They will not accept it. So for people, whatever is the worldview that they have right now, that has given them some way of making sense of life. And if we challenge their worldview, especially the point of wanting them to reject that worldview, that's like we try to take away that torn, tattered blanket from them. They will fight with their life for it. So somehow, while they are having that torn, tattered blanket, we need to put the comforter around them. And when they experience this is so soothing, this is so comfortable, this is so warm, this is good, do I need that tattered cloth? They'll give it away at that time. So it's generally philosophy, I have found it very, very difficult, although I use logic and I like logic, but I have found it very difficult to actually convince people solely at the level of logic. It is people need a warm, uplifting experience. And this is where I see Radhanath Maharaj is a genius. He basically, it's like we had been taking these Western people for a tour, and there was one black boy who had come with us. So while he was going along, we had a class on Prabhupada. He googled Prabhupada and he found Prabhupada's statements on blacks, and some of them are very provocative. He got extremely agitated. So Shaman Bro talked with him, I talked with him. We tried to explain from different perspectives, but he was just not accepting. But then he came here, he attended the Pushpabhishek festival, he heard Maharaj's class, he participated in Kirtan. He said that I felt so enriched. He said, the enrichment that I have experienced, he said, there must be something right in what you people are doing. And he said, I am ready to put aside what Prabhupada has said about blacks. If the followers of this Swami can create such a wonderful atmosphere, then there must be something that the Swami must have got right. So now people say this is far from accepting Prabhupada as the authority or as the founder Acharya, this whole authority, but it's experience that actually transforms people's hearts. So, and in from our own tradition also, Pratiksha. So certainly a certain level of logic and argumentation is required to open people to even try out the experience. But it is experience that makes people decide. So when the eco-village started, when some Western people started coming, so Maharaj specifically told devotees, don't tell anyone to chant Hare Krishna. So when he first time saw a Western Mataji with a bead bag, Maharaj actually went and asked her, did anyone tell you to get this bead bag? She said, no. Actually, I just saw everyone doing this. I asked them what they are doing. I felt like getting one myself. So Maharaj is very happy with it. He said that we want to give people a welcoming experience and let them make the decision. So it is difficult. It is quite different from the way we have ourselves been introduced and the way we have been trained to train others. And I don't say that all of India has become postmodern. Much of India is still at the modern level. Authority is accepted. Religious authority may not be accepted so easily, but authority is still accepted. But this is a truth, and it requires it's a very different approach to outreach that is required. That's a valid point. Yeah,
Just you're saying about the is more Indian is like more hierarchical. So you are meant to say like a teacher and a disciple, something like that, right?
Yeah, it's like.
But in the Western countries also we do have a tutors, mentors. So why we don't see there as a hierarchy?
Well, first of all, like name. In India, we refer to our boss or teacher by sir or madam. In the West, people use the first name for even their teachers. So it's more informal. Of course, without authority structure, nothing will work in life. There is authority and subordinate is there. But say, even Indians who go to America, they would much more prefer to work in a company started by an American than a company started by an Indian. Because what happens is, Indians, they demand the kind of work culture in India. So in America, if your boss calls you on a weekend, the first thing the boss will say, I'm sorry to disturb you on your weekend. In India, you cannot imagine a boss saying, I'm sorry. In fact, the boss will say, I call you, why did you pick up the phone? And then first say sorry to me for not picking up my phone. You should be 24/7 next to the phone when I call you. So there the ethos, there is a very, I was advised when I started going to the West, there's a book called Working with Indians. That's written by an American software manager. He said that he worked in teams with Americans and Indians, and he said that there were so many miscommunications, misunderstandings, and he said and both sides were treating each other as incompetent or irresponsible. But he said it's just a different culture. So, for example, in India, say if there is an American boss, Indian boss, and there is an Indian subordinate, American subordinate, and say there is a project in a particular field where this subordinate is actually the expert in that field. The boss may not be expert in that particular field. So say if the boss makes a particular statement which is wrong, the American subordinate will politely but promptly say, sir, or they will not even use word, actually it's like this. They will be polite. But the Indian subordinate can't even dream of correcting the boss. The project may face a lot of trouble, but you cannot show your boss in bad light. It's like India is said to be a the Eastern cultures are very much face-saving cultures. Nothing is as important as making sure that the respectable face of a respectable person is protected. So if a subordinate corrects a boss in public, that boss will make the life of the subordinate hell for the rest of their life. So now so what he says is that, say, I have to, if I want that subordinate to speak, I cannot even tell the subordinate, do you have anything to say? He will still not say. He says, I have to call his boss in advance, and that boss has to tell the subordinate. in this meeting, feel free to speak your mind. Only then he will speak. So there's a definitely difference in, ultimately some level of hierarchy has to be there. Otherwise, without authority, things will not work. But it is not the same. There's a huge difference. Am I making myself clear the difference? So, yeah, go ahead.
When it comes to the same topic, follow-up question with respect to authority. So, should there be any, at what stage the Indian culture of authority shall be implemented in the preaching in postmodern culture? Or would it be automatically imbibed by them at certain point of time?
That's a difficult question. There's a book written called Branding Bhakti, so which is about ISKCON's attempt. It is basically a series which is talking about how various religions are presenting themselves in contemporary audiences. So this is a book about ISKCON, and in that book they have studied three gurus: Devamrita Swami, Radhanath Swami, and Hridayananda Swami. So how they are trying to do, all three are trying to do Western outreach, and how they are trying to do Western outreach. So of course the author is academic scholar, so they have to criticize everyone. But they analyze and then they evaluate. So a part of that evaluation is criticism. So basically it's that Devamrita Maharaj, and according to this book, what he is using is, they call it bait and switch. Bait and switch means what? You promise one thing and then give somebody something else completely. And it's like you tell, oh, you will learn about self-help, you will learn how to improve your relationships, and the person comes, chant Hare Krishna, your relationship will improve. So that's called, like, you promise one thing but you give something else. It's like bait. Bait is something which, bait, like a fish, you catch a fish with a bait. So bait is what you promise, but then when the person comes, switch, you give something else completely. So it's like, so his approach is, he talks about his Bhakti lounges that talk about wellness and everything, and many people come. But now this is his analysis. I talked with Devamrita Maharaj about that book also, but I'll talk about Devamrita Maharaj's take later. But his analysis is that you create a phase which is very postmodern, but after the person comes inside, it's a very rigid authority stuff, and people just get very disoriented by it. I came for one thing and I got getting completely different. So that is one way. Now Devamrita Maharaj told me that that is not the way I want it. But many of the devotees who are actually running these projects, sometimes they work, because although they are connected with him, they were not necessarily introduced. They have seen ISKCON working also. So they later on bring the ISKCON very horizontal, vertical way of working. So he said there's something which is true in the book, but something is of course a interpretation which is a distortion. Now Hridayananda Maharaj, he goes to the other opposite. He says Bhakti is a path to Krishna, not a path to India. So according to him, there is no need for any aspect of Indian culture to come for Bhakti in the West. Now this has created a lot. He has got a lot of critics in ISKCON because of that. So he feels that from different parts of the world, people will practice Bhakti in their way and come to Krishna. And he has his case for it. Now Christianity is the most widespread religion because Christianity is not tied to any culture. There is no such thing as a Christian culture. So he used the example that the Bible says that you should sing hymns in the praise of God. But it does not say hymns in which meter, hymns in which style. So that's why if you go to a South American church, it's clearly a South American church. It's not a Middle Eastern, it's not Jerusalem being put in South America. And that's why if you go to Indian churches, now they have Jesus Sahasranam. They have adopted many aspects of Indian culture. And they say this is the flexibility of Christianity. Now of course, so he has a particular way of doing things. So So the question that comes is, so the criticism of that even within ISKCON outside is that
What is their take on that style?
who's there? His authors. No, he says that, so okay, how if says it Krishna West, how much is it Krishna and how much is it just West repacked as Krishna? So so how much is it? So that's a question over there, and it's a valid question. There's also like that the point of cultural misappropriation. See, what happened is yoga has become very popular in the West, and there is a little war going on, intellectual war going on over yoga between people like Rajiv Malhotra and people like Deepak Chopra and others. So Deepak Chopra and others, they want to portray yoga as universal. And that's why they say yoga has nothing to do with any religion. And they say that yoga originated long before the constellation of religious denominations that have now become Hinduism. And in this way, they want everyone to practice yoga. But so initially, when yoga started becoming popular, Christians, there are Christians who have seminars. Yoga is from the devil. Yoga is satanic. You should not be practicing it. Now, many Christian churches have a whole genre called Christian yoga. And they have re-envisioned or reimagined Jesus sitting in various postures, actually yogasanas. So that is the Deepak Chopra side. Now what is happening is, Rajiv Malhotra and others, they are saying that what is happening in the West, the good parts of Hinduism are taken by the West and Hinduism is not given credit for that. But so in schools or in the media, what do people see Hinduism to be? Hinduism is a caste system. Hinduism is the exploitation of people. Hinduism is the burning of widows. Hinduism is the drinking of cow piss. So they say that the negative caricatures of Hinduism are what are left with Hinduism, and all the positives are taken out. And that's why they say that yoga is Hindu. So sorry, what was your question? I got lost. I was trying.
What was their take on the Krishna West?
Oh, so that's cultural misappropriation. So cultural misappropriation means that you take something from a particular culture, but then you don't give credit to that culture. So like yoga is taken from India, but Indian culture is not given credit for yoga, or Hindu culture is not given credit for yoga. So there are many examples of teachers like this who have taken, like Herbert Benfield is a very prominent proponent of relaxation response, and he has taken many things from Indian tradition, but he does not give any credit to Indian tradition. And for him, his reasoning is that as soon as I associate this with some religion, then it creates sectarianism. So he is accused of cultural misappropriation, because you cannot. How much can you divest Krishna Bhakti from Indian culture? So is Krishna Indian? Well, Krishna is universal, but Krishna is certainly worshipped most in India. So where exactly do we draw that this is the boundary? This is Indian culture that need not be adopted, and this is spiritual culture, or this is spiritual principle that has to be adopted. So that is a complex question. And see, with respect to culture, has 4 different things. There is food, there is dress, there is nomenclature, and there is music. Among many things, there are 4 major things. So as far as food is concerned, ISKCON has more or less become like pan culture. Rather than we taking Indian cuisine to the West, we often bring Western cuisine to India through ISKCON. Like chow mein, I heard about the name first after I came to ISKCON. I had no idea about it. So with respect to dress, Prabhupada was to some extent particular, and we have been particular to some extent about that. Now with respect to music, now during Kirtanand Swami's time, Kirtanand Swami had created he said that all these songs in Bengali or Sanskrit, people can't understand it. So he had created translations of all the songs in the local languages. So Mangal Arati would be like a Hindi translation of Samsara Damanal, and a Hindi translation of Guru Puja, Hindi translation of Narsimha Arati. In America, it is an English poetic rendition. So he said that, and that was his reasoning. That's how we'll reach people. So how much can we change the music? That's open to question. How much can we change the nomenclature? So most of us, from functional perspective, even for Indians, our names are too long. Isn't it? So nobody calls me Chaitanya Charan. We call it CC. The Radha Prabhu said mailed to me and several Western preachers say CCP. So one devotee wrote back to me privately, he says CCP in America is the Chinese Communist Party. He said, don't use this acronym at all. So our names are very long. So now what do you do with the West? Now in the West everybody shortens their names. Like Shamanand Prabhu in the West Rowdy, they call him Shama. For me, Chaitanya, I just introduced myself as Charan. Chaitanya Charan just doesn't work. So names are functionally meant to address. Now you say I want to remind people of Krishna, but like the obstacle for Western people becomes from the name itself. So what do? Will we give Western names? The Catholic Church has started doing that. Now if you see, even Christians like YSR Reddy and over the previous person, none of their names are changed. The Reddy will still remain a Reddy, but he will become a Christian. So they have taken the biblical names and they have found Tamil, Sanskrit, Marathi, Hindi equivalents of those terms, and they use those. So I don't know we can do that, and I don't think we can. The way Prabhupada made ISKCON. But the point is, so that's the other extreme, Radhanath Maharaj. Then what he says about Radhanath Maharaj is that Radhanath Maharaj has basically redefined yoga to be Bhakti yoga. So he's using yoga as a front to, so yoga is a vast tradition and Bhakti is a completely different tradition. But he's using yoga as a mask to present Bhakti. Now I talked with Maharaj about this. Maharaj said that, but Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita says Yogina Upi Sarvesham. So it's not that Radhanath Maharaj is the first person to say this. Krishna is the first person to say this. But they say that the Bhagavad Gita is only one of the books about yoga. Yoga has its own tradition, and there's no mention of Bhakti as emphatically in the Patanjali Yoga Sutra. But I mean, she sees Radhanath Maharaj as in between. As Radhanath Maharaj is one extreme, Radhanath Maharaj, Devamata Maharaj is another extreme. So basically, coming back to the answer to your question, that how much should the authority be emphasized? At what point? I think it will depend on individual nature of the student and nature of the teacher. Some teachers will naturally function in a vertical way. And even in the West, when I'm saying Western culture, it's not monolithic. Even in the West, there are people who seek some authority figure and they want to follow that authority. That's one of the main reasons why young people go to Islam. Because what you said earlier, people are confused. Everything is nothing, nothing is everything, whatever. So from that confusion, a religion that gives absolute certainty. This is right, this is wrong, and you live in this way, and you will attain, be delivered. So even Western women born in Western culture, they, not in large numbers, but they start wearing the Islamic dress. And there are some people who just want that certainty. And so there will be people like that everywhere. So if somebody has a nature and they function in a vertical way only, then they will be who they are. And they will find a particular kind of following. But the danger is such people can very easily become fanatic. So it's one thing, this is the way I want to function, that's okay. This is the only way that everyone should function. This is the only authentic way to function. That's where it becomes fanatic. And some people will just naturally be very horizontal. So those who are naturally horizontal, they'll function that way, and they will attract people from their demographic. So when I was doing these podcasts, Helping Monks podcast, especially during the pandemic, and I noticed that with none of the Indian leaders, I could actually have a discussion. It's like a podcast was just another way to give a lecture for them. But with Americans, I could have podcasts. Now, of course, our Indian leaders are also learning, and some of them have appeared in mainstream podcasts, and then it's more of a discussion. But I was talking 4 or 5 years before. So the assumption of the vertical was very natural. The horizontal was very normal in the West. So I was in America. I was when actually it was right Radha Gopinath temple only. That spiritual master had come here, and I went to meet him, and I asked him a particular question. He said that, okay, let me, my secretary know. So he was staying in one room, and his assistant secretary, not servant, whatever you want to call it, was staying in the next room. So he immediately went to the next room, and in both these rooms, there are these like comfortable chairs. So he went to the next room, and he was standing, and his disciple was sitting and talking with him. I just couldn't digest it. The most Indian gurus, they will have some bell, you ring the bell, and the disciple will come running. But here he went to the room, and he was standing at the talking 5 minutes. The disciple didn't even offer a chair to his guru. So I was completely shaken. He says, what kind of guru-disciple relationship is this? But then he asked me, hey, when I disturbed, what happened? So I said, I just couldn't digest this. I said, I didn't even think about it, and neither did he think about it. So now, was the disciple talking respectfully? It was a respectful discussion that his guru was giving some instruction or something about what to do. So certainly some level of authority disciple structure or authority subordinate structure has to be there, but the externals may look very different. So at what stage, I think it will depend on individual to individual, the teacher and the student. So I don't think we can change ourselves too much. Either the people who are grown up in a particular way can change ourselves. So I was talking with Radheshyam Prabhu. Radheshyam Prabhu said that that he's starting Western outreach and he's doing some things, mostly focusing on Indians right now. And he said that if purity is the force. If people see an authority with purity, they will become subordinate. That's how Prabhupada was able to make people subordinate. I said, not really. There is truth to it, but even those who became Prabhupada followers, they grew in an authority structure. In the 1960s, 1950s, when they grew up, they had an authority which they found untrustworthy, and they rejected it. And when they found a trustworthy authority, Prabhupada, they accepted it. But the generation that has grown up, were born into 2000, 1990, they have never had an authority structure like that. So for them, it's a completely new way of living, the new way of functioning. And there's a lot of resentment to authority figures. Almost 25% of Americans' kids grow up in broken families where it's mostly like the mother taking care of the child. And more than 50% of American blacks, they grow up in broken families. And because the father is not there, there's a huge amount of resentment against male authority figures. So there's one Western Outreach Center where there was a Prabhu who was in charge of the temple. And he said, I had so many problems. And finally, he decided that he would make his wife in charge. And he said, just by that, 60% of the problems went away. Because, for them, because they never had a father in their life. So the male authority is by default treated with suspicion. So these are very, very deep-rooted scars that people have. So does that mean there is no authority? Well, does that mean the men should have no power? Not like that. But it is that particular context. So Desh Kala Patra is very important. with respect to how authority can be established. So, just to complete this point, even in Mumbai, if you see the South Bombay crowd, as compared to say the students in IIT, who have come from various parts of India, they're very different. They may be Indians only, but it's a huge difference. Those kids who grow up in South Bombay, their ethos is very different. So those kids who have grown up in different parts of India have come to Mumbai. Their ethos is different. So that's why time, place, circumstance. Yes, Nityanand.
Very good. It's nice, interesting division and makes sense. I was thinking about these divisions.
Divisions. Which
point
division?
of appropriation, like Christians are appropriating. If you see in our traditional system also, it seems like to some extent they also address this issue. Like you see in all the traditional sampradayas, if Madhva Sampradaya means there is a Sanskrit, Moola is given weightage. Same time there is Purandaradas Kritis, his writings, local language influence is there. Shri Sampradaya, Ubhaya Vedanti they call, Divya Prabandham. Basically it's echoing the original Vedic text. And Gujarat also, everywhere in India, Pandharpur, Abhangas as well as.
Correct.
So I think there is it is been also thought about it in our old people and they got this particular understanding. But what they did intelligently is that they never gave absolute authority to the local language. They always got the link, Kamba Ramayana is there, but it cannot replace Buddha Ramayana. So it was going parallel. Even now also it's effective. Like Maharashtra, Abhanga has a particular power. But as long as the Moola is there, it cannot, meddle with this. But we are talking about in ISKCON during, after Prabhupada, these things. But what they thought, the difference is that they undermine the original Sanskrit text. It's like a complete replacement. There's no need of that, So that can create a problem. I think that's why, this imbalance, either this or that, But the two eyes, the other sampradayas go like that. So this one observation I thought. Second, regarding this authoritative thing also.
This is a good point. Let me respond to that. It's a very good point. See, basically, you could have two extremes in a pendulum. It's like reduce the spiritual to the cultural. That means Ramayana means only Valmiki Ramayana. No anything else. Now Ramayana, that was at a particular time when Sanskrit was spoken. So reduce the spiritual to the cultural. The other is divorce the spiritual from the cultural. So both these extremes need to be avoided. And when cultural misappropriation happens, that is basically we divorce the cultural from the spiritual. So yoga is nothing to do with India. It may be just originated in India, but it's universal. Okay, that's true. But when it is divorced from the current culture entirely, then the current culture gets no credit. So what you said in the Ramayana is that there is respect for the original. While also, from a practical perspective, far more people in the north know Ramcharitmanas than they know Ramayana, Valmiki Ramayana. And probably in south also. In Maharashtra, far more people know Karamaras, Abhangas than they know any Gita shlokas or even Vedic mantras. That's fair enough. So the balance would be that the spiritual through the cultural. Now, specifically, which aspect of what culture needs to be preserved, that is something which is complex. So, in some South Indian temples, they have, while doing ritual also, they may have verses sung not in Sanskrit, but in Tamil or Telugu. In some places, for certain areas, like they have songs which are vernacular. Certain places, like especially where you do the yagya and other things, nobody will use vernacular language over there. So that's like there's a difference between yajna and kirtan, deity worship and kirtan. So I think there is a nuancing, but the challenge over here is that there's ISKCON was also accused of this cultural misappropriation. They say Krishna is not a Hindu god. Krishna is universal. You know, that's a problematic statement. To say we are not Hindu, we cannot really say that. We can say that we are giving universal spiritual principles. At the same time, if we have to be identified among any of the traditions of the world, we will be identified as Hindus. We are certainly not Muslims or Christians. So our ISKCON Communication Department has made a statement that we are a monotheistic Vaishnava tradition within the broad family of traditions known as Hinduism. That's the way they are trying to reconcile both of them. So it's a danger which has to be carefully addressed. And the second point, that people need local cultural expressions, and that is true. So to what extent they can be accommodated, they can be facilitated, that is something which our movement still has to evolve at. So we most likely will not be able to have, that in our temple programs we will have the traditional Bengali or Sanskrit songs. But then maybe as our movement expands, maybe we will have people who are singers in Marathi. They may compose some songs. We may have singers who compose some songs in English. We may have some singers who compose some song in today's Bengali. We may have singers who compose. Who knows? We don't know how that is going to go. But the point is that people need to connect with Krishna through that which is familiar to them. So the spiritual is unfamiliar, the cultural is familiar. So if it's double unfamiliarity, unfamiliar culture and unfamiliar spirituality, it becomes too much of a burden for them. So it is a challenge which has to be negotiated. Yes, Prabhu.
Actually, our own acharyas have, there is a precedent for this. You see, most of Chaitanya Charan and other such literatures, there is a Sanskrit verse quoted and there is a Bengali rendition of it. And and the commentaries also, where the acharyas gave Sanskrit commentary and they gave a Bengali poetic rendition of it. It must definitely be for the...
So that's a striking difference between, say, our tradition and, say, the Islamic tradition. So it's like the Islamic tradition, the further you go down to its roots, the more fundamentalist and narrow it becomes. But our tradition, the deeper we go into its roots, the broader it becomes. So it's more like the tradition is broad, the contemporary expression is narrow. And I think that was a particular reason, a particular time, that's how it evolved. But yes, there is a lot of breadth in our tradition. So it's not that we are deviating to pander to modern times. We are only drawing from our own tradition things which may not have been required in the past. But they are required now and we are using them now. You had a second comment too? I think we'll stop after 5 minutes.
I think we are about time. Yeah, this is an interesting subject matter which has to be properly dealt in ISKCON as a society of future. That the idea what Brahmachari was also putting, that the Gaudiya Sampradaya and Sri Vaishnavas are pathways. They have one thing clear is that appropriation of the Sampradayas to the local people as well as the modern age, place plus time. They did it in such a way that they did not lose a root. So Bhagavatam is echoing the Brahma Sutra. Brahma Sutra is echoing the Upanishads. Upanishads are the end part of the Vedas. So that the whole thing is held all the time. The Bengali songs are echoing to Bhagavatam. As Gopiparantan said that the Rupa Goswami's literature, though they evidently speak explicit rasa, which is not even apparently seen in Bhagavatam. But it is not that these Goswami's books are competing with Bhagavatam, but it is complementary to Bhagavatam. So these particular, going to the root and holding that, so that is not possible who are the common people. So those who are like in the leaders or those who are having a what do you call not only knowledgeable but also spiritual practitioners, who held in high esteem. So they are expert in both the field, So they have been respected. So whatever they are saying, that other people follow. The local people, they may be happy with Abhangas or they may, so what is the difference between the Abhanga tradition and the Shiva Vaishnava Madhva tradition is there? In Maharashtra, even though the Abhangas are famous, but there are a lot of confusions regarding Siddhanta because the Abhangas are not connected to the root because of the lack of Sampradaya, Brahminical tradition or something. I mean, as far as my understanding goes. But in Diya Prabandham or Bengali songs or Purandara songs, the Brahminical connection is intact. So in ISKCON, in future, if you want to go for English translation, English songs or Marathi appropriation of Bengali songs, it is okay, but that has to be done not as absolute replacement of the originals. One. Second is that should be done echoing the originals, So these things can be kept in mind when we even can make for outreach, that particular. Otherwise, we may lose the whole. That's kind of my observation.
Yes, true. See, basically, there is Siddhanta and there is Sanskriti. Sanskriti is like technology. Everybody uses mobile now. But if the mobile stops working, most people don't even know how a mobile works. For that, you need somebody who knows the science. So always the technology's reach will be far, far bigger than the science's reach. The people who use the technology will far, far more. So like that, the culture will reach far, far broader than the Siddhanta. But when the culture goes off, it is those who know the Siddhanta, they can fix it. So we cannot go so much that this is Siddhanta and there is no place for Sanskriti. That Sanskriti will vary. That scientists themselves are not technologists. Science is more about understanding how things work. Technology is more of making them work at particular places for solving particular problems. So Siddhanta is the nature of reality. Sanskriti is how can this current reality be rearranged so that people can reach the ultimate reality. So there will be variants in Sanskriti, but without a Siddhanta, so we need, ideally speaking, some people at least who are strongly connected with this and strongly connected with this also. They will maintain the balance. We can talk more about this balance later on, but one last point is, the word adaptation, and what you are talking about is more of adaptation, not appropriation, is a different word entirely. So appropriate means that there is a foreign culture and that takes something from the other culture and swallows it. So that's appropriation.
The wrong connotation.
Yeah, so that means it's the word appropriate is an adjective where it means correct or good. But the verb appropriate means to take for oneself. So the word appropriation comes from that word, not the adjective.
Kind of stealing.
So it's stealing, appropriation. Whereas adaptation is, there is a main culture. This is the main culture or main tradition, you could say. And that the surface is changed to accordingly, like the language changes. Prabhupada went to America, I didn't preach in Bengali. He preached in English. So that surface level there's a change. So that what we're talking, every tradition has to do adaptation. So I'll quickly summarize and maybe we'll continue this in some future sessions.
Thank you, this is nice.
Thank you, Prabhu, for your comments. So I broadly discussed, we went in today's lecture, but I have discussed 4 main points. First was, we discussed about how changes affect our outreach. That was the broad theme. And in that connection, we discussed how what may seem as degradation may actually be like misconceived or misdirected attempts at autonomy. So somebody wearing a particular kind of dress, it's not necessarily that they're degraded, but they just think, I want to break free from the patriarchy. I want to do what I want to do. Then I discussed about the ages and how things change, like pre-modern, modern and post-modern. So in the ages, the source of authority changes. So its pre was what? Shastra, scripture. Modern was science. Postmodern is experience. And connected with this experience itself, we can say the East versus the West. So in the East, still the authority structure is there. So whether it could be science, it could be scripture, it could just be tradition, the authority, it's much more horizontal. West is become much more vertical. And much more horizontal, sorry. The East is much more vertical. So our style of outreach, it is very suited for this. So now how do we create something suited for that? That we have to find out. So I discussed these 3 examples of, say, Vedant Maharaj is much more horizontal, like Devamrut Maharaj is at least according to that analysis, Radha Maharaj is somewhere in between. That there are basically yoga is a pathway to Bhakti yoga, but different devotees are trying different things, and we'll have to see what works. So ultimately it is Desha Kala Patra. How much authority, like for me, I came from Pune, which is a very rigid authority structure, and Chapati was very different for me. I had to recalibrate my understanding of what Krishna consciousness is. So that itself is, so it's not that it's just East and West, it is India. Within India only we can have different authority structures. So that's individual. And the last part we discussed about is that the link between the spiritual and the cultural. So we want to avoid both extremes, reduce the spiritual to the cultural. You can't say that only pakodas are spiritual, pizzas are material. No. That's Braj Bihari wrote an article about pizzas or pakodas. And that is a balancing liberal and conservative perspective in ISKCON. So, reduce spiritual to the material, to the cultural, and divorce spiritual from the cultural. So both need to be avoided. We understand that the spiritual needs to be approached in a culturally appropriate way, culturally adapted way. So this adaptation is good, but in the name of adaptation we want to avoid appropriation. So thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki Gaur Bhakta ki Jai Gaur Premanande. चेक करो चलो